We're heading into a river today where the average fish is 18 inches. This river begins where three of the most iconic Montana rivers join as one. And it's also a place where you can fish dry fly hatches throughout a majority of the year. We're heading into the Big Mo, and today you're going to learn how to fish dry flies and fish Montana in style. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Hey, how's it going? I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing Podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid. I grew up around a little fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers and guides than just about anyone out there. Craig DeMark, Montana outfitter with a love for family business, is going to walk us through catching big trout on a big river. Today, you're going to find out why you should be fishing downstream to fish, some tips on fishing pressured water, and the number one thing you should be thinking about for your drift. This is it. The drift is the key. Fishing dry flies, we're going to get into that today. Plus, you're going to get his best casting tip and what you need to do if you hook into that monster fish. I've been dreaming about this river for a long time, so let's get into it. Craig DeMark from On DeMark Lodge.com. How you doing, Craig?
Great. How you doing, Dave?
Good. I'm excited for this conversation today because we're going to talk about one of the famous rivers out west, really in the country. I think a lot of people, maybe goes under the radar a little bit, for some reason, but it is a massive river, great fishing. So we're going to talk about the Missouri today. But first off, maybe we'll just start there. What is it about the Missouri? Why there's other big famous rivers maybe you hear a little more about. Why does the Missouri kind of fly under the radar a little bit, or does it?
I think it does a little bit compared to some other Montana rivers. It is a pretty popular river. I think most people think of, when they think of Montana, think of the Madison, the Yellowstone, places like that. But the Missouri, really all of the major southwest drainages come into the Missouri, and it really is kind of the main river in Montana. Of course, it's such a big river, but no, I don't really know why it isn't talked about more, because it does have, personally, I think it's the best fishing of any river, especially just consistently for most of the year. It's a great fishery. The big thing about the Missouri it's really famous for is the dry fly fishing. Pretty much has dry fly fishing. If you really want to seek it out, from February, March, all the way into November or later. It just, with lots of different hatches, it's a tailwater, so pretty consistent temperatures, which creates those kind of hatches and that bug life, and just lots of fish and lots of really big fish in this river. It is a really good nymph fishery. It's a great streamer fishery, but it's more well known for its dry fly fishing. Yeah.
The dry flies, I'm glad you mentioned dry flies, because that's always something on my mind. I think that a lot of people, I guess you can struggle with anything, but I feel like dry flies is a challenging one because you got to learn hatches. You never know kind of what's going to go on. But yeah, so that'd be great to dig into that a little bit today. But before we get there, maybe let's take it back to fishing. I always love to hear kind of the story of how, you have this fly fishing lodge, you have this family-run business. I really want to hear the story. So how did you get into fly fishing? What was your first kind of memory influences?
Well, I got into it probably in my early teens. I didn't grow up in a fly fishing family. My dad didn't fly fish, but he did fish a lot. He loved the outdoors, fished and hunted a lot. He would fish lakes, and as a kid, we would take yearly trips to the Yellowstone area. So I think that's kind of where I first began my infatuation with Montana. We were from Idaho.
Where in Idaho?
In the Boise Valley.
Oh, okay, Boise, yeah.
Yes. So we would vacation in the Yellowstone region and fish the lakes there. And I think traveling there, I would see people fly fishing the rivers in those areas, the famous rivers, the Henry's Fork, the Madison. And so I just always wondered about that. And then I just kind of self-taught, picked up a fly rod, started fishing lakes, doing some float tubing, and then got into the stream stuff, and then just kind of broke into it that way. So it was always a passion when I was young, and just continued that. So as we got older, got into adulthood, raising families and stuff, we really didn't have the time to explore working in the fishing industry. I actually come from the auto repair industry is where.
Oh, nice.
So I actually still do have a business in Idaho, but we wound up moving to full-time to Montana a few years ago. I then started, I was working in a fly shop for a while, Then I picked up guiding and then started guiding for a lodge down in, we lived in Dillon, Montana, and I'd always liked those rivers. We had some friends there. I really enjoyed the Beaverhead, the Big Hole, the Madison. We fished that a lot. And then, so that's why I started guiding, was mainly the Big Hole, the Beaverhead. Then I started guiding at a lodge down in, on the Big Hole. And then as we just kind of progressed through this, I got my outfitter's license and we decided to get our own business in the fly fishing industry. And so as we lived in Dillon, I had never really fished the Missouri before. And then we started fishing it when we lived in Dillon. And I wondered why I hadn't come here first. Honestly,
Right.
it really is that good compared to other rivers. But so as we thought about starting a business, I just said we've got to be in the Missouri, just because it's just such a fabulous fishery. It always has water, big fish, great dry fly fishing. It's a lower elevation, so we have a longer season there. So we just wound up buying this small place, and opened a lodge.
Right. Was it kind of like a slow creep, and all of a sudden you turn around and you've got this, small lodge and operation on the Missouri, or does it feel like you put in a lot of time and years into it?
No, it really, I think you hit it on the head there to begin with. It was kind of a slow creep. It seems crazy that we wound up here, but also it seems natural that this is where it wound up. It really feels like this is kind of what we wanted to do the whole time. We actually did go back about 25 years. We had a hunting preserve for a while. We did some bird hunting, and we bring hunters in and feed them and do lunch for them, and then take them bird hunting. And we did that in Idaho for a while. But so we've kind of always had a background in doing this, but that's kind of where that came from.
Wow, that's amazing. And the auto repair, I love that. So maybe we'll get some auto tips out of you later in the episode.
Right, yes.
That's always that's been my nemesis my whole life. It seems like I got a little bit of a newer, truck. So things are better now, but I've been through some times where I had some vehicles that gave me problems, you know what I mean? But
yeah, that's what I've always said is coming from that side of it, being an auto repair, it's what's so enjoyable about what we do now is when you're in the auto repair business, all of your customers, nobody is happy to come and see you.
Right.
Nobody wants to spend money. It's always unexpected.
Yeah.
They didn't budget for it, but when they come fishing, that's enjoyable thing. So they're always happy to see you, happy to do business with you versus the auto repair. It's a totally different feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is cool. Well, on the Missouri, I think most people know of it. I think I'm not sure how many people have fished it, but the cool thing is, yeah, it's a big river. And maybe talk about the river itself, like kind of where it's coming through, where you fish it, and then it's actually the start of what are the big rivers that flow out of the Missouri?
The origin of the Missouri is actually where the Gallatin, Jefferson, and Madison all come together at Three Forks, which is quite a few miles south of us. So then when it comes together, it forms a big river, and then it actually goes through, there's 4 dams on it, and then 3 big dams, which are Canyon Ferry, Hauser, and Holter. So we are on the stretch that's below Holter Reservoir, and it's a giant tailwater. It always runs clear. It's basically the stretch that we fish is from Holter Dam down to the town of Cascade, which is about a 40-mile stretch. So it's a big river with long stretches. So there's lots of diversity. A lot of those stretches all fish differently. So a person could come here and fish and get 3 or 4 different experiences in a day, in 3 or 4 days, excuse me. Yeah. But
Gotcha.
That's what's so cool about it. But yeah, that's what makes this river so good is that we do have 3 reservoirs behind us storing water, lots of cold water. So that's what keeps it good and consistent.
Yeah, it keeps it consistent. And you mentioned the 3, and what were those 3 rivers again that make it up?
The 3 rivers are the Gallatin, the Madison, and the Jefferson.
Yeah, and the Jefferson, yeah, which are all, pretty well-known names of rivers.
Yep,
I guess
absolutely, yeah. The 2 rivers that make up the Jefferson are the Beaverhead and the Big Hole.
Oh, wow.
We've got lots of good water coming in.
Yeah, so that's everything, right? And then what do you think? I mean, you may have said at the start, but again, the Missouri is kind of famous for big fish, lots of fish. What is it most famous? Why is it famous?
Yep, all the above. It is the average fish in the Missouri is an 18-inch rainbow.
Really?
So yes,
18-inch rainbow is the average fish.
Yep. So and we've had the last couple of years we've had almost record fish counts. We sit at around 7,000 to 9,000 fish per mile these last couple of years. and that's browns and rainbows. More of the average is 5,000 to 6,000 per mile, but we've had some really good years, but you don't lose, even with big numbers of fish, you don't lose the quality of fish. It's just lots of big, and the fish here they really are, once you see them, they're built different. I mean, they're big, thick, strong fish. That's what's so enjoyable about it, is that you just, you don't really hardly catch small fish here. It's usually once you hook a fish, it's a pretty good fight.
So perfect. So I think that, there's a lot going for, that's why I'm excited about the trip, as we're looking ahead at getting out there, is that you've got a great river, a big river. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about fishing dry flies as well, which is awesome. And then also you have this lodge, which is I think a smaller lodge. Maybe talk about that. Where is this lodge? If people were staying with you, where would they be coming in? And then where would that be in relation to the kind of the river you're fishing?
Our lodge sits, as far as time-wise, we are almost exactly between Great Falls and Helena. We're about 45 minutes from both cities to our doorstep. So that's another nice thing about us, is that we can, or this river, is that you can fly to Great Falls or Helena, and you're just right here. It's not a long car trip. So yeah, so we sit in what they call the canyon part of the Missouri. We're in the mid cannon region, or the part of the river is what they call it. So we're about 15 miles below Holter Dam, and then we're about another 20 miles or so down to the Cascade. So we sit right in the middle. So we have really good access to the whole river. So if you fish with us, I mean, when we launch, we're putting in anywhere from like 10 minutes from our lodge to half an hour. So not a long car trip to where you're fishing. And yeah, so that's kind of where we sit. We only hold, our maximum is 6 people. So yeah, we can keep things small, and then I'm your guide. My wife cooks for you. My other son guides for us. So yeah, it really is a family-owned, family-run business.
It is. Nice. So yeah, you're going to be nearby in the fishing, and you mentioned 40 miles. Like, what is a typical length if you're fishing like on a day? Is this where you go out for a day trip and do a few miles down there?
Right. Yeah. That really varies on time of year and flows. But if a person is covering a lot of water, and maybe you're doing some nymphing, or you're just kind of doing some blind casting with dry flies, we'll do like a 8 to 10 mile stretch in a day sometimes. But if you have really good dry fly fishing, like with the Trico hatch or the PMD hatch or the Betas hatch, sometimes you're only doing 4 or 5 miles in a day, because you will float for a while, then you'll find a pot of fish, and then you'll anchor up above the pot of fish and fish to them for anywhere from half an hour to an hour and a half sometimes in one spot. So those floats are shorter, but you're still out for the full day.
Gotcha. And this is mostly a drift boat operation. Is it hard to fish with a from the bank?
Yes, we run drift boats, of course. If a person does come here and wants to wade fish, there is some really good public access for wade fishing. And then there are times, even when we're fishing out of the drift boat, that we'll stop at places, and there's side channels or gravel bars or islands that we'll get out and do some wade fishing on. And so yeah, there are lots of opportunities that way. It is a very large river. It's very wide, but most of it's not very deep. It's pretty shallow. I mean, most of your depths are in that 3 to 4 foot range. So it's pretty good wade fishing too.
Gotcha. Good wade fishing. Great. That's awesome to hear. Well, let's take it through kind of your program, maybe throughout the year. I know you mentioned that you can fish it a long period, which is great. When do you start your trips? When does that typically start during the year?
We start up in April, and then we end in October. Although this year we've wrapped up for the season, but the weather we've had has been absolutely phenomenal. We could have been probably fishing well into November, comfortably with good temperatures and stuff. But no, we go from April to October. In April, the weather can vary. You can have really nice sunny days, or you can have, cold, rainy days with spitting some snow. But April's very, well, I hate to say it's very good fishing, because the whole season's pretty good fishing, but it can be some of that this year, April might've been some of our best fishing. We'd start out in the mornings and do some nymphing, and then, the blue-winged olive hatch would show up in the afternoon. And so we do some dry fly fishing in the afternoon, and they were really, really good days, really productive. And it is a time that there isn't a lot of people here either. That early spring is good for that. So yeah, you can get some good fishing and not a lot of people in the river. And then as we move into May, it gets nicer, gets warmer weather, you still have really good fishing with the blue-winged olives and March browns and still doing some nymphing. And then as you move into June, the pale morning dun hatch starts. I think that hatch, and it seems like the pale morning duns is the most popular hatch here. A lot of people show up for that because it is really good. Again, really good dry fly fishing. And then the caddis show up around that time a little bit later. And so you can, fish pale morning duns in the morning, fish dry fly, fish caddis in the afternoons and evenings. Then as you move into July and August, you get the tricos start to come, and you mix some PMD hatches in there with the tricos, still some caddis. And when you get that later summer period, I mean, you very rarely put on nymph. You're just usually fishing single dry fly most of the day. And then as you get into August, start getting hopper fishing. So you can fish hoppers, fish tricos in the mornings, fish hoppers in the afternoons. Going to September, you get still some tricos. You get a pseudo hatch, which is, I think it's one of the more underrated hatches on this river. They're very tiny. They're like a 24 size wise, but you can usually get away with just fishing like a size 20. And it brings up a lot of fish. There's guys around that say that it doesn't bring up big fish, but I would argue that because there are small fish, but there's also big fish eating with them. So then you get, the pseudos, and then the blue-winged olives come back in the fall, and you fish them from September all the way through November, honestly. But for us, that ends in October, and then you get some October caddis, and you still have some hopper fishing in September. And no, it really is. It's crazy how much dry fly fishing we have. We're so lucky to have what we have here. Yeah,
that's awesome. And the pseudos, what are the pseudos?
They're just a tiny mayfly.
Okay, I wonder, how do you spell that?
That's actually the nickname for them at the actual.
Oh, okay.
Officially, they're pseudoclonian, I think, is. But
okay,
it's PSEUO. Yeah, it's a long name.
But... Yeah. We'll look it up and get some. That's one scientific name. Yeah, I don't know all or many of them, but that's one I haven't heard of. So I'll
just little mayflies.
Yeah, little mayflies. Yeah. Exactly. So, and the tricos are kind of little too, right?
They're small. Yeah, they're like a 20, 22, but we fish 18s quite a bit for them because you still have some PMDs around, and I think that hatch it brings up tons of fish. You'll sit in one spot and there'll be 30 fish rising around you, and those fish are just, when they're eating the tricos, they just really get into a rhythm, and it's more about the right drift in the right lane at the right time. It's not necessarily the pattern, but you just got to time it so they're going to be eating that fly when your fly goes by. Yeah, it's a blast. I love trico fishing.
Gotcha.
But yeah, and the PMDs are like a size 16, March browns are a 14 to 16. We do get a few squallows in the spring, so you can sometimes run a bigger stonefly pattern with that. And we get hopper fishing. So there's another thing about the Missouri. People talk about it being really technical and lots of little dry flies, but we fish hoppers for 2 or 3 months. So, and size 6 and 8. So it's not necessarily mean that we have to throw a size 20 trico all day.
Right. Yeah. You're mixing up a little bit. So that's awesome to hear. So when the dry flies are going, you're not really having to fish like a dry dropper. It sounds like you're just using a one dry fly.
Typically, yes. Yep. A person can throw a dry dropper. We will do that. I would prefer, personally, I just like throwing a single dry because you get a better drift with a single dry, and there are lots of different currents in this river, so that drift is the most important thing about dry fly fishing. So I like to just be pretty accurate and just get that fly going down the right lane. But we do, a lot of times you throw a hopper dropper and you'll put the nymph only drop, a foot below the hopper, and because those fish are usually suspended in the water column, and that's a good time to target those fish that are going to maybe eat a hopper and then hopefully they might eat the nymph if it's there in front of them.
Gotcha. Wow, this is great. So you're floating down. Maybe take us there. So if we're on the river floating, you mentioned, are you kind of anchoring up around pools, or maybe talk about that? If you got a good dry fly, I don't know if we want to take it to a certain hatch, but describe that. How are you getting into the fish?
Let's take like PMDs, for instance, the pale morning duns. Those nymphs, those are coming out of shallow gravel bars. So these fish move up onto the really shallow flats during that hatch. Sometimes they're, it's only a foot deep where you're fishing. And so you'll find a good spot, find several fish rising, anchor up on a gravel bar, shallow. Sometimes when we do that, we'll get out and wade fish, just anchor up in the middle of the river on a gravel bar and step out and wade fish. And or you can sit in the boat and do it too. But that's a really fun one because the PMDs bring up a lot of fish too, and a lot of big fish with the PMDs. But so yeah, we'll just float down to a likely spot, and usually there'll already be fish rising. Sometimes you might want to get to a spot a little bit early before the fish start rising, but no, that's very enjoyable. Like I've had times that I've literally put in at a ramp, floated down about 100 yards, stopped and anchored, and been there for 3 or 4 hours.
Right.
In just one spot because there are that many fish rising, and it's just, it's crazy.
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You hop in and you got a longer float to do, but the first spot's so good, you hang there for the majority. Yeah.
And sometimes you're there all day, and then you just wind up just rowing out, just pushing out to get off the river. But it is. And then like during that time, you literally could go to a gravel bar and fish PMDs in the morning, and then caddis will start later afternoon, and you could be there till dark. And
Yeah, that's right. And then you have the caddis you said are kind of typically in that June, July kind of summertime period into the summer.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. This year we had a really good caddis here, and I've still been fishing caddis within the last couple weeks. I mean, we had a fall caddis that comes. It's kind of a tan, like a 14 or 16. And yeah, they're still eating that. And then we have big October caddis too around.
Oh, you do?
A few. So, yeah.
How are you fishing? I'm always interested in the caddis because it seems like one that's not as straightforward. How do you fish the caddis? What are the flies you're using? What's your setup look like?
I will use like a corn-fed caddis. I still do like the old X-caddis. That's another good one. Really, it's one that you like to, like that corn-fed, I really like it because it rides high and you can see it really well. But there are, you fish it in shallow gravel, and a lot of those caddis rises are very inconsistent because they're just, the fish are eating them more opportunistically when they're floating over, as opposed to getting in a lane and just sitting there and eating a line of PMDs. But every once in a while, caddis comes by and they'll eat it. So, and then it's also effective to like get on a gravel bar and just skate caddis. Have you ever done that?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So you'll cast kind of down and across, and then lift the rod so that caddis will skate across the top of the water and make a nice V shape. And those fish sometimes just chase it right out of the water. It's an explosive rise, but it's, it kind of depends on each individual fish and what they want. I mean, some of them like it as dead drift, some like it as skate. And then, and that's another one you can always drop a caddis pupa below it too, and usually get fish to eat that too. So that's
okay. Yeah, gotcha. So obviously the water really well out there, so it'll be, easier to find the fish. If somebody was coming there maybe on their first time or their first trip, how do they get into that? Like, if we stay on the dry fly game, how do they kind of match the hatch, know where to start, where to fit? Are they just looking for risers?
Yes, typically, yeah. Yep. It's like I said, it's pretty obvious on this river during dry fly season because the fish, you'll see fish rising. They start rising with the hatches, and they just get really consistent. And so you'll go to, if a person was coming here for the first time, I would just go to, it depends on the hatch. I mean, it's with PMDs, you're going to go look for gravel bars. If it's tricos, you're going to look for more of that slower water. But yeah, that's it's quite obvious once you find fish. And typically the smaller the rise, the bigger the fish. If you see a big splashy rise, it's usually a smaller fish. But if you just see that one fish the nose is just barely breaking the surface and it's sipping, that's usually a really good fish. But and then as far as matching the hatch, I mean, there's lots of different patterns to use for each of those hatches, and it's usually pretty obvious what they're eating if they're eating PMDs or tricos. And I like a high vis trico so you can see it, it sticks out a little bit from the other ones, or like with the PMDs, I'll use a high vis spinner. But it's really not so much about the fly, it's about your drift that you get and how you fish it. Just dead drift in the right lane is so important. When people say that it's not the fly, that really is true.
It's the drift.
It's usually drift. Yep.
Yeah. How do you get a dead drift? I know its currents are kind of crazy and stuff like that, but what would be a tip there to get a nice dead drift when you got different currents sweeping around?
We usually fish above the fish. We'll usually either be waiting or anchor above the fish and fish usually down and across. And then if you're coming here, practice a reach cast. That's the most important thing, is getting that reach cast and then being able to come to a hard stop and get that line to pile up and coil up a little bit. And then another thing that people aren't really used to when they come here is a lot of times you're trying to extend your drift. So you need to be have a lot of slack line out of your reel and shake that rod and get a lot of coils as it drifts. And sometimes you'll rip out and, dump 20 feet of line just trying to extend that drift into the fish. But that's not a skill that just is not used at a lot of other places, is dumping that line out and just extending that drift. But
that's right. Are you guys using typically your typical like 5-6 weights? What does your setup look like?
Yes, we usually we're using the dry flies. I'm usually using a 5-weight, 9-foot 5-weight. For our lodge rods, we use Orvis, but yeah, just a good. I don't like the really super fast rods. I like something with a little bit softer tip, especially with the small dry flies. But yeah, and then we're using 9-foot, 10-foot, even up to 12-foot leaders with usually ending in 5X. I mean, I like to stay as big as I can on the tip size because these fish will break you off.
Yeah.
So sometimes I've fished. We'll fish tricos on 4X. That's a pretty small fly on pretty good sized tippet, but if you get the right drift and you're above them, they will eat it. But then at least you're not. Once you hook them, you're not going to break them off because these fish are so hot. They just, immediately when you hook them, usually the rainbows are out of the water and several times and runs downstream and the browns are just very strong. That's the challenge once you hook a fisher is keeping in the line.
Yeah, keep them on. What's your secret there? How would you coach somebody that got a big fish on? How are they, getting that fish in so they don't break it off?
It's a very fine balance between too much pressure and not enough pressure. It's like with the smaller tippets, usually when they lose fish or they break them off, it's just that they didn't have enough. They usually keep their finger on the line, or when you get those fish on, a lot of times you just have to let go of the line. Even if you have a lot of slack out, if you have a lot of line in your, down below you at your feet or whatever, just let go of that line, let that fish run. That's usually the case is they just put too much pressure on it and break it off. Now, if you usually let them run, and then that's the other really nice advantage of being in a drip boat is you hook a really big fish, and if you're anchored up on them, you pull up anchor and we go with the fish with it downstream. And so we can chase them down.
Right. That's awesome. And so what is, like you mentioned, the 18-inch average? I mean, what are some of the bigger fish that you've heard of or seen out there?
Oh, there's huge. There's browns, you see browns over 30 inches.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Giants.
It's rainbows in the mid to upper 20s. The thing about this river is pretty much every day you're on it, you will see or have a chance at something that's truly a trophy fish. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes you'll be watching a pod of fish rise and you'll be watching these 18 to 20 inch fish rising. And then all of a sudden in the middle of it, you'll see something that makes those 18 to 20 inch fish look small. Right. It's like, oh, that's different.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're tough. They're hard to catch, hard to land, but they're definitely there. Yeah.
Yeah. They're there. They're there. Awesome. What would be, you mentioned, you kind of went through a little bit on the dry flies. People call you up and they're talking about a trip. How, what's the timing? Like, what do you tell them as far as the best time to hit it or a good time?
It really depends on what you want.
Yeah. Let's say we want to do, obviously I think dry flies, let's say we want to put this dry fly together and then, all these hatches sound amazing. I guess you go to maybe what is the most challenging, I guess? What is the most challenging? What's the easiest dry fly hatch to fish?
Probably tricos are the most challenging, but also sometimes it sounds funny, but sometimes they're easy because you have so many fish rising. It's, so many targets. But I would say that probably the PMD hatch is the one that most people would say is one of the easier ones because it's like one of the first big hatches, and the fish early in it aren't necessarily as picky about the drift or the pattern. But that's the one. And if a person doesn't care about the drift or wants to not trying to find that really small fly or see that really small fly, come and fish hoppers in August. That's a blast. It's usually a fish that you didn't know was there, eats it, but just throw long casts, let them roll over a gravel bar, and usually something will come up and eat it. But that's a fun one. I like the Betas hatches because there's so many fish rising during that also, but it's really hard for me to pick a favorite.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Really, it sounds like you can go any month out of that period and probably have some dry fly, like you said.
Pretty much. If a person specifically wanted to fish dry flies and said, I don't want to ever put on a nymph or anything else, I would come in August. There's not too many people here. because the river does get some weeds in it, but we just fish single dry flies and you don't really have to worry about the weeds that much. And it's, that's a great time. But if a person wants to get, have a 20 to 40 fish day and just fish nymphs in June, that's a great time too. You want a nymph, but, and then you also get the PMV hatch with that too. But it's, it really is personal preference to what you want to fish in this. It's been described to me by a client as a very user-friendly river. You can usually
Right.
on any day catch a fish on a nymph, on a dry fly, and a streamer all on the same day, and that's typical.
Gotcha. And you guys do a little streamer action too throughout the year?
Yep, we do. Yeah, like this time of year, the fall is a big time for that. A lot of people come and fish streamers because the browns are getting aggressive and spawny, but I fish them this spring a lot. Fish them in August. I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good streamer river too. And usually, the browns make up about probably 10 to 20% of the population of the river. But if you fish streamers or hoppers, you catch a higher percentage of browns and rainbows just because the brown's like a bigger meal. So that's, if a person wants to really target a big brown, I would come and fish hoppers in August or September. That's a great time for that too.
Gotcha. This is great. And talk about the cabin in that whole situation a little bit. So if we're out there fishing a few days, maybe on the water, maybe take us to kind of the first day. You get up. What time are you having breakfast in the morning? What time are you getting on the water?
Again, that's another one that varies depending on the time of the year. Because if you're, in the spring, we'll probably eat breakfast. When it's still cold and takes a little while for the fish to get going. We'll eat breakfast at 8, out of the lodge by 8:30 or 9, and on the water, 9 or 9:30. If it's tricos in August, that's a really early hatch. So sometimes we're eating breakfast at 6 and out of here by 6:30 or 7, just so. And there's usually fish already rising when you hit the river then. But no, we leave the lodge, put in the river, and usually I rig up all the rods before we leave the lodge, and then we're ready to go once we hit the river, get there and just drop the boat in, fish the morning, eat lunch in the river, then fish the afternoon, and we're usually off around 4 or 5 o'clock, and then back to the lodge and get a shower, have hors d'oeuvres, have cocktails, and then dinner. And that's the real rock star of our place is my wife. She's the cook, yes, and and she cooks all the food, all homemade meals, and she's the host, and yeah, she really does a great job with that. And people really rave about the meals when they come here. We don't leave you hungry. That's
amazing. Yeah, that's good. That's definitely a good thing. We find that the food is the X factor. It's always or the icing on the cake.
Yeah, the fishing isn't always consistent, but the food better be. That's
the food better be. Yeah, and it's cool that you have the family thing going too, right? Because you got your kids out there. Maybe talk about that a little bit, because I have a couple of much younger kids, and they're not totally into fly fishing yet. We kind of do it, but how did that work? Was that obvious that was going to happen, or how did your kids get into it?
I think it was pretty obvious. I mean, obviously we're a very avid fishing family. When they were growing up, both my kids, I have 2 sons, and they were both had fly rods in their hands when they were, 5 or 6 years old. And they did a lot of spinning rod fishing. I think that's a good thing to do with the kids, is to not just force the fly fishing, is to do some spinning rod fishing and let them fish. And it doesn't matter if it's trout or bass, or we did a lot of warm water fishing when they were growing up, but just the thing that they can get out there and fish and see results and catch fish. And then,
right.
Then they moved into fly fishing, and it was pretty natural because that's what we were always doing. And that's, my younger son really developed a passion for fishing, and he started guiding at, he was, I think 18, 19. So yeah, he, moved right into it, and just, it's been really enjoyable to watch them both. My other son, he fishes, he's more on the tech side. He helps us with our website and stuff like that. So that's been very helpful, but it's been, right now we're doing some improvements and some maintenance to the place, and both of them are up here helping us do that. It's enjoyable to be able to do that with your family. And that's, I was very lucky that I could, growing up, that I could work with my dad and my mom and my brother. And now I can, work with my wife and my kids. I mean, not many people can say that they've truly been family businesses their whole life, but that's...
No, that is amazing. Yeah. So you're in your family business with your dad. Was this the auto shop?
Yeah. The auto repair shop, and my brother worked there, and I worked there, and my mom was also there. Yeah. It's
wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Good deal. So, and pressure is something that comes up a lot. I mean, Montana, you hear a lot about this. The Madison maybe is famous for, you hear these stories about, I don't know, 20 drift boats sitting there in a line getting ready to put in. Is the Missouri at that level? And when it gets pressured, what are your tips for like maybe avoiding some of that pressure?
Like all these rivers, it does get pressure. I think the one thing about this, and even our guests that come to us when they fish this, and we'll, sometimes in the really busy times, like in June and July, you'll drive to a ramp and there's the parking lot's full and they're just like, oh my word, there's a lot of people here. I'm like, yeah. So, but just wait till we get out in the water. And then once this river's so big that everybody spreads out, you really don't notice other people while you're on the river. It's, a lot of people concentrate at the ramps, but there's so much room in the river that you get away from that. But and if there's times that it seems too busy, there's so many different stretches of this river that you can fish and things that you can do that to avoid that pressure. Like if you're on the Big Hole or the Madison or the Beaverhead, those are smaller rivers and they don't handle the pressure like this river can. I mean, that's they're, some of those are 100 feet wide. So yeah, if you've got 4 or 5 boats in one spot, you're very, very crowded, can't get in the spots you want to fish. But this river, there's fish all the way across it in different spots. So, and a lot of times if you get a pack of boats, we'll just stop for a while and take in the sights. It's a very beautiful place, and then let boats pass by and then move on again.
Yeah, because there's plenty of water.
And then you can also stagger your times. I mean, sometimes we'll get up real early, get out before people, you're getting through a stretch before other boats are there, or go a little bit later, after everybody puts in. And then that's the advantage to being small and family owned, is that sometimes we can adjust our times that we can be off the river at 6 or 7 and eat dinner later, and get behind people or get out earlier. That's, but I really, that the amount of boats here doesn't really ever affect my fishing. I guess I'd put it that way.
It doesn't. Yeah.
No, it's, there's just so many different spots to fish. So
yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's just it's a big river. And what is the width of the river? I mean, just on average, it's like a football field wide sort of thing in that range? Yeah.
I mean, it can be 100 yards wide to, I mean, there's probably spots that are 250 yards wide. I mean, there's some big wide spots, but yeah, it's our flows, to give you an idea. I mean, typical summer flows are in that 5,000 to 6,000 CFS range. We had a little lower water this year, so we were about 4,000 most of summer, but that's a typical flow, and that's a lot of water to fish, especially as shallow as it is. So it's it's really spread out. But yeah,
gotcha. Wow. And then, like you said, you start earlier in the season, wrap up sometime in October, later in October. And you said you have capacity for 6 people. If you have 6 people there, is this something where you're mixing up the guiding, or how does that look if you had 6 clients at the lodge for the week?
So yeah, it's like I said, my son and I are the primary guides, and then I've got a couple other really good guides that come in, and that's the other nice thing about being small, is that we know who our guides are, who you're getting, and we can be really consistent on who's guiding you. So yeah, no, everybody. Typically, if we have a group or a couple or 3 groups that are here for 4 or 5 days, you usually get you'll get the same guide every day. You'll have me for the whole time, or my son the whole time, or the other guide for the whole time. But so yeah, that's how we usually do it. And it's we try to match people up with personalities that are going to be good for the guides that they have, and vice versa. And there's people that you get your very experienced fishermen, and that might be a type that we put with one guide because of how they're going to guide you. And then there's people that are beginners, so we'll put you with patient people, which that's usually me.
Yeah, right.
So that will teach you and not put a lot of pressure on you to do things they expect, versus just teaching you how to fish the right way. And
right, more about the fishing.
Yep, and lead you into it.
Yeah, we get into that a lot with some of our, we kind of do, we call them our schools, so it's more of, I think the school is more of a education first, where the fishing, of course, I mean, you're talking, there's some big fish in the Missouri, so definitely we want to have some opportunity, but, it's like coming away with things that you'll be able to take away to your home water, like learning. Is that kind of how you look at it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep. There's just different skills that you have to have here that make you a better fisherman. And yeah, they translate when you go somewhere else. And that's the other nice thing about this river, though, is that if you have somebody that's a beginner and you can nymph fish and just really concentrate on that mending and just have big number of fish days and catch a lot of fish and really enjoy it. Or if a person wants to learn how to dry fly fish, I love doing that. I mean, even if you haven't dry fly fished before, I've had people that come out and do that and then just teach them all the little intricacies of the drift and extending that float and then watching the results when they hook up a fish. It's just, that's a blast. I love doing that. That's something I really encourage people to do. You get those, there's some people that just they don't really care about how they do it. They just want to catch a fish, and that's fine. But there's also those people that are really up to the challenge, that want to experience the dry fly fishing you're not going to get anywhere else, that you get here and learn how to do that. And don't care as much about numbers of fish you catch, but just the quality of the experience. And I mean, I fished to a very large rainbow for 2 hours and finally got it to eat, and then it broke me off.
Huh.
But
wow.
Just that experience of watching that and going through all those steps and that process, and then getting that fish to finally eat. I mean, that's the one I like. Yeah.
Well, it seems like, I mean, there's a lot of ways we can do this, but I feel like the dry fly school would be kind of an awesome way to think about it. And maybe that summer month where you're getting multiple hatches, would that be something that would be kind of cool, where you maybe hit that July, August, maybe August, where it's not as busy, but you're getting a lot of dry fly action?
Oh yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. That'd be a great time to do it, because that's pretty much, you're going to have the consistent hatches every day, the consistent weather, and then you'd be able to just learn a lot of things about how the dry fly fishing will process, just because you come out day one and you've got rising fish, and then day two you have the same thing. You're not, because that's what happens a lot of times, that you go to a river and the wind's blowing, there's no fish rising, the hatch isn't quite there. But I mean, this river, you get there that late July, early to mid-August, and there's going to
be something
very persistent stuff. And that's the one thing you can't control, is the fish. And where here, you're going to have a really good chance of having rising fish every day.
Yeah, every day. Cool. And then is the wind, you mentioned the wind, is that something that can be a factor on that river?
Yes, it can be. I mean, that's pretty typical. I mean, if you're in Montana or the Rocky Mountains, anywhere, wind is going to be a factor. So
yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like if you go saltwater fishing, on the flat, you better be able to pass into the wind. And that's something here too, is you need to expect wind. I mean, usually summer months, mornings are calm, and then the wind will pick up in the afternoon. But and the funny thing about this river, though, is that even if you have windy days, there's still fish rising somewhere. You can find them.
That's it. Good. Well, let's take it out here real quick with the our tip, tool, and takeaway segment from today. We've really focused on dry flies, which has been great. I think we'll talk more with you as we get into some of these other techniques and things like that. But if we keep it on dries, you've given some tips here. What would be your first tip today heading out of here? Like, somebody is, maybe they're on the Missouri or a big river, they're fishing dries, and they've been struggling. What are you telling that person to have more success?
Work on that reach cast. Don't try so much to fish upstream to fish. Try to get those spots that you're not going to spook fish, and fish downstream to them, and so you can get that drift and get the fly ahead of the leader. And that's the first thing the fish sees. And that's, like I said, if the fish isn't eating your fly, it's usually because it's got a little bit of drag on the drift. It's not the fly. You can change flies all you want, but until you get that drift right, they're not going to eat it.
Yeah. In our tool section, I got a few more just kind of gear. I love the gear stuff. First off, boats. What's your boat? Do you have a few different types of boats you guys have used, or do you just have one?
Yeah, I have Clackercraft. I have a Clackercraft Headhunter too. I like the skiffs here on this river because they're very light to row. The wind doesn't affect them that much. And then the low profile, they're easy to get in and out of. They're easy to fish out of because you can stand up and you can see, and you've got the low sides, and that's what I like. But I've always, for a long time, I've really liked Clackercraft. My son has a row, which are made here in Montana.
Oh yeah.
But no, this river really was made for trip boats.
Yeah, and the low pro and the skiff style is pretty cool, because I still have just kind of a normal high drift boat, but out there, those skiffs are so amazing. Do you remember like that? I mean, I'm not even sure. I know we've talked about this, but they've been out there a while, right? That style of boats.
Yes, they have. I'm not sure what the first skiff was. That South Fork skiff, but they've here in Montana, we don't have the big heavy water that like you get in the coastal stuff for steelhead and that. And so we don't have to worry about going through rapids or anything like that. That the low profile is just really is the way to go. Especially, we get some guests that are older and it's hard to get in and out of a boat, and they're just so easy to just step over the side. And as far as rowing them, especially on this river where you've got flat water, although the current's pretty swift, it's deceivingly swift.
Yeah, it's a big road. Yeah, 5,000 CFS is a lot of water.
But you can just row upstream, move them around, move them across real fast. They track real nice.
That's it. The skiff. Yeah, I rode my first skiff, a hide this last year, and it's amazing. They're just like everything you're saying. They're just way easier to row. Yeah.
Yep, they are. Yeah. Yep. Hide makes a good boat too. There are a lot of people here on this river have adipose, which because they're local boat, they're made in Helena. So that's
yep.
But it's pretty much, I'd say 80% of the boats you see on this river are skiffs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did a drift boat series quite a while back, and it was really popular. And I interviewed a number of different boats, including we got one with Clackacraft on there and stuff. So I've always been a drift boat kind of nut. So and then we had the guy who basically wrote the book on the history of drift boats. We had him on as well, which was a great one.
Oh, cool. Yeah. With the original Mackenzies, is that what they were?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It was. We talked about the Mackenzies. There was a couple of different styles, but then we got into the whole thing with the Grand Canyon, which really was interesting to me because I've never floated the Grand Canyon, and imagine these guys going down in drift boats down through that giant whitewater.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're taking, basically I'll put a link to that show because we had a number of episodes, but it was really crazy because those boats, the way they do it is they're actually wooden, if you could believe that. So they're wooden. And they deck them over, so there's no open space, so it's all wooden decks.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, so when water comes in, there's only enough room for you as a rower to sit in your little spot, and everything else is all covered.
Almost like a kayak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like a kayak. And the cool thing is when you flip those things, they can flip them back over in the rapids, which is unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah.
So they have this whole thing. But so we did a whole series on that, and I'm trying to think of the name of, I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote the book on that, but I'll put some links to the show notes to those episodes people can take a look at. So good. So we're talking gear. I love that we're on the gear. What about, you're on the boat, you're fishing. What's your one kind of gear item that you can't kind of leave the cabin without?
I have a fish pond net is what I use, the big boat net. That is one thing you want especially on this river, a very long handled net. The fish, once you get those fish to the boat and trying to get them in, it's, it can be a challenge with a shorter net, but long handled net is, but I have a Yeti gearbox that's loaded with my all my fly boxes, my tippet floating, everything. And that's the one is if that box is there, I'm good. But if it's not,
you got everything in it.
Yeah, I'm not. I'd say that's probably the most important thing is just
right. Don't forget the gearbox.
Exactly. That's when I worked in Dillon, my boss was Tim Tollett, who owned French Wranglers, and a friend of mine. Too. That was every day he'd tell the guys as they went out, flies, lunch, shuttle. That's your.
Oh, right. Flies, lunch, shuttle. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah. Because really everything else, those are the big things. You forget that, you're in trouble.
Yeah. But I have seen people forget lunch. Maybe that's the most.
I have heard stories about the lunch. Like we actually had Henry Winkler on, the Fawns back in the episode. I remember he was talking about on the trip about lunch, how he's so into fishing, he doesn't even want to eat lunch. Like he's just like, you know what? Don't bug me with lunch. Let me keep fishing. But I think most people do love a little, because it's never good to get hungry out there, right?
Right. Yeah. No, there's times that we'll be fishing and have a good hatch, dry fly fishing, and I'll look at my watch and it's 2 or 3 o'clock and like, oh, I guess it's time for lunch now. But that's the thing. But people that come here, they're looking as much for the accommodations and that. Yeah, the lunch and meals are very important, and the cocktails on the deck after you get back, and that's. I
know. That's awesome. Yeah, and you're sitting there on the river. Yeah, and you guys, your cabin is pretty much on the river. You can kind of walk down the river. Is that the case?
Yes, we're very close to the river. And then between our place and the river, we have some public property. So we have guys that will fish all day, and then they'll go out after dinner and hit the evening hatch right here at the lodge and wade fish and have some success. And that's very nice to have that access. And where we sit, we can there's floats that will take, just stop at the lodge for lunch. We can just stop at the bank and get out, walk up to the lodge and have lunch and get back to the boat. And that's really nice on a cold, rainy, snowy day to do that. Or yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So you can stop at the lodge and just anchor the boat out front.
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. And you mentioned earlier at the start, Helena and Great Falls are kind of in between. What are the differences between those cities? Or is there a lot of similarities, or are they quite different?
They're similar. Great Falls is a bigger city than Helena. Great Falls is about 60,000, and I think Helena is like 35 or 40,000. Helena is the state capital, so it does have a lot of facilities. So does Great Falls. I usually tell people to look at plane rates of which airports less expensive to fly to that one.
Right. Yeah.
And it's probably 50-50 to fly into each. Yeah, Great Falls is a little bit more of a working class town. Helena is a lot of government buildings, stuff like that, government jobs. So they're a little bit different, but they're both great places. They're very, very nice cities.
Lots going on. That's the cool thing. Yeah, you've got your lodge there in the middle, but yeah, if you wanted to go into town and do whatever, you could do it right there within 40 minutes.
Right. It's just far enough that you are away from any city life, but it's close enough that it's convenient. So it's and that's the thing about with this river. There's quite a few lodges on this river, but it really is a necessity because there's not really a hotel to stay at. There's one or two restaurants around to eat at. So the lodging part of this is a big deal. And we just try to make things, when people come to us, just make it as easy and simple as possible, that they can just show up with their clothes, and then we'll worry about everything else. And we try to tailor, we contact people before they come out and just kind of try to tailor everything to what they need, and just make it simple and easy for them. And it's their vacation.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. And just give us a takeaway from today. We've talked about, dry fly fishing and kind of a lot of stuff in general. Somebody's thinking about heading out there. What is the takeaway you want to leave them with today from what we've been chatting about?
I really think that this river is what you expect from Montana to fish. I know sometimes the people go to other rivers and things that they hear and the expectations they have about Montana and fish in the rivers, sometimes it can be a disappointment, but this river never disappoints. It truly gives you some kind of a great experience every day you're on it, whether it's a fish that you just saw or a fish that you missed, or that fish that you landed. I mean, it's more big numbers of fish, but yeah, you pretty much come from this river every day with a memory or experience that you're going to remember the rest of your life.
That's sweet. Yeah. And I love the fact that it's always nice to throw in there the fact that you got a chance to find some big fish. Of course, any day you never know, but there's always that opportunity. You're thinking, man, there is that 20+ inch fish out there that I might hook into today, right?
Yep. It's funny when you are on this river and you don't think of an 18-inch fish as a big fish.
Right. In most places, a lot of places, 15, 16, 17 inches. I mean, that's a great fish, right?
Yeah, that's a day maker. Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes a trip maker, but no, this river, it's when those fish are just like, you catch them like, oh, it's an 18-inch rainbow.
Right. Well, hopefully we're doing that. That'll be the goal.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Cool. All right, Craig. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today. We'll be in touch, obviously, on some more good stuff here. I'll send everyone out to ondemarklodge.com. They can check in with you and get some information. I'm excited because I've never fished this river before. I've heard a lot about it. It's famous to me because it's just where it is. All these rivers we talked about around it, and then you're fishing this big tailwater, right, in Montana. It feels like it doesn't get any more, fly fishing. It seems like that's the center of the universe. Does it feel like that for you? Does it feel like you're in the heart of like the fly fishing world?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yep. And we've got great rivers around us, but no, this really does feel like the epicenter of Montana.
Right. And you see drift boats, right? I love that when you go to Montana, you drive through it, you go and you're like, all of a sudden you start seeing more drift boats. Everybody's got drift boats on the back. Is that what it feels like to you?
Yeah. Parked in yards. Somebody's towing one with a
random
car.
Yep. I love it.
Lots of drift boats. Yep.
Love it. Good stuff. Cool. All right, Craig. Well, thanks again, and we'll be in touch, and looking forward to getting on that river.
Yep. Same here. I'd love to have you up here. It's great talking to you, Dave.
All right. Your call to action today. Right now, you can head over to ondemarklodge.com. That's ONDEMARK Lodge. Check in with Craig. Find out if he has any availability. whether that's dry fly, nymph, streamer. We didn't get into everything today. We talked dry flies. I wanted to focus it, but we're going to get him on in the future to talk more. But check in with Craig. Let him know you heard about this on the podcast. And if you want to get on the Big Missouri and fish for a chance at some of these fish and get a nice lodge, nice cozy lodge, it's the place on the river. Do that today. All right, you can follow that show if you want to support this podcast. That's one good way. We mentioned connecting with Craig. That's another one. And if you want to go on a trip, we're going to be working on putting this together. So check in with me, Dave, at wetflyswing.com if you're interested in the Missouri. If you're in the area or if you want to fly in, we're going to be talking more about this. All right, I've got, as always, lots to do today. So I'm going to head out of here. Hope you have a great morning. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon or a nice quiet evening if it's evening time wherever you are in the world. I appreciate you for hanging in all the way to the very end, and I hope you keep listening to that next episode. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.